This is the Australian Debt Clock website. It's a site that's created by morons who don't understand the economy in order to scare you. So, why is debt not a scary thing? Let's look at what government debt really is. To start with, we're going to look at a normal bank. So this is a bank, and I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to put my money in the bank. And let's say I deposit $50. So I've got my $50 in the bank, and at any time I can go to the bank and withdraw that as a $50 note. The bank says, I don't want you to withdraw the $50. I have some use for that money. So why don't you put your $50 into what's called a term deposit? And there's my little padlock icon. I've locked up the money in a term deposit. I can't withdraw it anymore. And that's a 12-month term deposit. Did the bank borrow my money? No, they already had the money. All that's happened is that I can't use it anymore. So they've created a restriction on the money, but they didn't borrow it from me. No one would ever call this a borrowing operation. So imagine if that bank is instead the RBA. Now, we've already said that when the government spends money, it creates money by crediting accounts. So our friend Miyako gets the salary $2,000. Now, Miyako can then choose to buy a government bond with that $2,000. All it does is lock it up. There's my little padlock again. Locks it up and pays interest, just like a term deposit. She can't use that $2,000 until the bond matures. When the bond matures, all that happens is that we remove the lock and she can withdraw the money. But instead of $2,000, maybe now it's $2,200. So why does the government sell bonds if it's not a borrowing operation? Well, imagine that instead of our account at the RBA being held by a person, it's actually held by a bunch of banks, the NAB and the CBA. And they have some reserves in their accounts. When they transact between each other, often there ends up being a debt from one bank to another. So say the NAB's reserves were all wiped out in one day. Everyone came and withdrew their money from the NAB. But the NAB still owed the Commonwealth Bank some money at the end of the day. They might go to Westpac, who has plenty of money, and say, hey, can I borrow $1,000 of reserves to pay my debt to the CBA? And Westpac says, sure, but I'll charge you interest. Now, the more money that is in the reserve system, the lower that interest rate will be. It's a simple scarcity issue. The more of something that there is, the cheaper it is. So in order to keep the interest rate at its desired level, the RBA will lock up some portion of Westpac's money in a bond. There's my little padlock again. Now the Westpac only has $3,000 to lend instead of $6,000, so it's going to charge a higher interest rate when it lends to the NAB. So the RBA simply sells bonds to control the interest rate at which banks will lend to each other, completely for operational reasons. It is not a borrowing operation, and it does not need to do so in order to fund deficit spending.